Welcome back, everyone. All right, so this time you've really outdone yourselves. You've sent in some absolutely incredible stuff.
Yeah, this is great.
We've got articles about Norse mythology, Japanese mythology, we've got some Greek mythology, we even have some Egyptian mythology. And then to top it all off, you threw in an article about a contemporary Croatian sculptor
Yeah, very interesting.
who uses mythology in his artwork. I mean, come on, you guys, this is a gold mine.
Yeah, and the connections are already so fascinating.
Right. So today, just for you, we're going on a deep dive into all of this. We're going to try to uncover what connects these different cultures, these different mythologies, and also what makes each one so unique.
Absolutely. It's a journey through time and across continents, really exploring the human need to explain the world and our place in it.
Exactly. And I think a great place to start is up north in the land of ice and fire with Norse mythology.
Good choice.
You sent in this article a complete guide to Norse gods and goddesses from Panorama Glass Lodge, which is a cool name in itself. And let me tell you, these Norse gods, they were not messing around.
Yeah, no kidding. They were a force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so first up, we have Odin. He's this, ultimate knowledge seeker, right?
Almost an obsession with them.
And he's willing to do anything to gain wisdom. He sacrifices an eye. He hangs himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days just to learn the secrets of the runes.
That's hardcore.
Yeah.
It really speaks to the Norse idea that knowledge, especially deep, powerful knowledge, comes at a price.
Right. I mean, talk about dedication. But he's not just some lone wolf scholar.
Right,
Well,
not at all.
yeah.
He's always accompanied by his two ravens, Hugin and Minin, thought and memory, who bring him information from all over the world.
Oh, that's right. And his wolves, too.
Exactly. Gary and Freki.
Symbolizing what, like his warrior side?
Exactly. They represent his role as a god of war, but he's also the god of poetry and magic. It's an interesting combination.
It is, right? War, poetry, magic, all wrapped up in one god. It makes you think about the different ways that power can manifest, you know?
Absolutely. And then you have Thor, the god of thunder. Everyone knows Thor.
Right, thanks to Marvel. But in the original Norse myths, he's a much more, I don't know, primal force.
Yeah, for sure. Like when the Vikings saw lightning, they saw Thor riding his chariot across the sky. And thunder. That was the sound of his hammer, Mjolnir, smashing giants.
It's so visceral, so immediate.
Right. And that hammer, Mjolnir, it's more than just a weapon. It's a symbol of protection against the chaos, which is what the giants represent.
That makes sense. Okay, so then we have Heimdall. He's described in the article as the shiniest god.
Oh yeah, with his white skin and gold teeth.
Yeah, that's a look. It definitely makes him stand out.
He's certainly memorable, and those visual details often hint at something deeper, like his 9 mothers, for example.
9 mothers.
Yeah, it suggests a mysterious and probably very ancient origin.
Huh, interesting. What else?
Well, he's also got incredible senses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, super fast reflexes, incredible hearing, even foresight. He's like the ultimate watchman.
Right, always on guard. And the article mentions he's also connected to the Norse social classes.
Yeah, which is interesting. It shows how their mythology was tied to their everyday lives, their societal structure.
Oh, I see. So it wasn't just about these gods up in the heavens. It was also about how things worked here on Earth.
Exactly. And then there's Heimdall's, like, obsession with Ragnarok. You know, the twilight of the gods, the end of the world as they knew it. He's constantly watching for it, guarding the Bifrost Bridge.
That's a lot of pressure, right? Literally guarding the gateway between worlds and waiting for the apocalypse.
No kidding. It really emphasizes that sense of impending doom that you find throughout Norse mythology. This idea that the world is going to end, but then be reborn again.
So it's not a happy ending, exactly, but it's a continuation.
Exactly. A cycle of destruction and rebirth.
Now, the article also talks about Alva, or elves. They're not gods, but they're these magical beings, right?
Yeah, kind of like spirits or supernatural beings. They're divided into light elves and dark elves.
But they're not always, good or bad, are they?
No, not necessarily. They can be mischievous, even dangerous sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like they represent the forces of nature, which can be both beautiful and destructive.
And in Icelandic folklore, they're invisible, right?
Yeah, but people believe they live in these big rock formations and that you have to be careful not to disturb them.
So even today, these ancient beliefs are shaping how people interact with their environment.
Absolutely. It shows how deeply ingrained these stories are in the culture.
Okay, so next we have Njord. He's the god of wind and sea, leader of the Vanir, which is another group of gods.
Right. For seafaring people like the Vikings, he was a really important figure. He protected sailors and fishermen.
And he's one of the few gods who actually survives Ragnarok.
Yeah, that's significant.
Hmm?
It suggests that even after the destruction, There's a possibility of renewal and new beginnings.
I like that. And then there's the story of his marriage to Skagi, the giantess.
Oh yeah, where she chose him based on only seeing his feet.
I know, right? It's kind of a funny story, and it adds this touch of, like, unexpected humor to the Norse myths.
It's a good reminder that even the gods could be a little silly sometimes.
For sure. And then we have the tragic story of Balder, the son of Odin and Frigg. He's supposed to be invincible, right?
Yeah, his mother made everything in the world swear an oath not to harm him.
But she forgot about mistletoe.
Yeah, that's the one thing she overlooked. And of course, that's what ends up killing him.
It's like a classic fable about the dangers of pride and overconfidence.
And it also shows how even the most powerful can be vulnerable to the smallest, most unexpected things.
Right. And then there's Vale, Balder's brother, who grows to adulthood in a single day just to avenge him. It's a powerful image of, like, grief and rage and the swiftness of fate.
It's like this force of nature unleashed, and it sets the stage for Ragnarok, the final battle.
So it's all connected. It's interesting that the article also mentions that Norse paganism is making a comeback in Iceland today.
Yeah, Asatru is actually the fastest growing religion there.
Really? Wow. That says something about the enduring power of these ancient beliefs.
Yeah, it speaks to a longing for connection to one's heritage, to a sense of belonging and meaning.
And it ties in with what we were talking about earlier with the Panorama Glass Lodge naming their cabins after these gods. They have an Odin cabin, a Thor cabin, a Freya cabin, and so on.
It's a reminder that these figures are still very much alive in the Icelandic cultural imagination.
Okay, so now let's switch gears completely and jump to the contemporary art world. We have this article, A Conversation with Nikola Vudrag, Contemporary Art Issue. And it features this Croatian sculptor who's doing some really interesting things with mythology.
Yeah, Nikola Vudrag, his work is fascinating. He comes from a family of metal workers, so he's got this deep connection to the material.
And he uses corten steel, which is really cool. It develops this, like, rusty patina that actually protects the metal underneath.
Yeah, he sees it as the blood of the earth, or ichor, or the blood of the gods in Greek mythology.
Wow, that's poetic. It's like the material itself is echoing these ancient themes of resilience and the cycle of life and death.
It's beautiful, isn't it? And he's also really into geometry, mathematics, physics. He tries to find the perfect shapes to express his ideas.
Yeah, and he builds these huge monumental sculptures for these epic themes, but then he'll also create these delicate, intricate pieces for everyday objects like coins. It's a really cool contrast.
And then there's his network series, which is made from thousands of small metal bars welded together to form these irregular geometric patterns. It's very intricate, very meditative.
It seems amazing. And the article talks about how his animal sculptures connect to mythological narratives, especially the labors of Hercules. He sees the animals not just as beasts to be slain, but as symbolic obstacles on the path to spiritual growth.
Right, like each animal represents a different challenge that Hercules has to overcome in order to achieve enlightenment.
And he takes it even further, connecting these animals to other symbolic systems like the Titans, the Greek gods, even astrological signs and the apostles. It's like he's weaving together this huge tapestry of meaning.
Exactly. He's showing how these ancient stories and symbols are all interconnected, how they speak to the universal human experiences.
And he's really interested in mythology as both story, like mythos, and speech, like logos.
Yeah.
He sees these recurring patterns in ancient narratives and tries to translate them into sculptures that resonate with people today.
Yeah, he's not just retelling the myths. He's extracting their essence and finding new ways to express those timeless truths.
And his Atlas Prometheus sculptures are a great example of that. He had them on display at the Venice Biennale, and they're really powerful images. Atlas is a hand gripping a pillar, symbolizing the weight of the world, all the pressure we carry. And Prometheus is a chained hand, representing the pursuit of knowledge and the consequences that can come with it.
They're such striking images, so immediate and relatable. It's like he's distilled these complex mythological figures down to their core, to these fundamental human struggles.
Exactly. And then he has these more abstract series, like Diamond and Deus Ex Machina, where he plays with this idea of the irony of rusted diamonds.
Right.
You know, how even in the pursuit of perfection, there's always going to be imperfection.
Right, like that rust, that imperfection is actually what makes it beautiful, what makes it real.
And it led him to create these negative forms, these molds with light inside.
Yeah, symbolizing ideas emerging from matter. It's a really cool concept.
He also has some interesting thoughts about public sculpture. He sees it as different from memorials, you know, like those statues of historical figures. Public art, for him, should engage with the present or the future, while memorials honor the past.
And he thinks there should be more of both and better communication between artists and the people who commission public art.
That makes sense. It's about making art that's relevant to our lives, to the world we live in now. And he gave some great advice for young artists, too. Like, inspiration often comes when you're not actively searching for it.
Yeah, it's about being open to those moments of insight, those sparks of creativity that can come from anywhere.
And surrounding yourself with inspiring people and using your time wisely. It's good advice for anyone, really.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're heading east to Japan. We have a bunch of articles about Japanese mythology here on study.com, Myth Encyclopedia, Mythopedia, and Wikipedia.
Awesome. What stands out to you about Japanese mythology compared to, say, the Norse myths?
Well, one of the first things you notice is the influence of both Shinto and Buddhism.
Yeah.
Shinto is the indigenous Japanese religion, and Buddhism came over from China later on.
Right, so it's a blend of different traditions.
Exactly. And they have this concept of kami, which are basically gods, goddesses, spirits. But it's a really broad term. It can encompass all sorts of things, from nature spirits to ancestors to even abstract concepts.
Wow, that's interesting. So it's like this whole world of interconnected spirits.
Yeah, and it speaks to this idea that everything has a spirit, that everything is sacred in some way.
That's beautiful. And the articles mention two really important texts, the Kojiki and the Nihongi.
Right, those are the oldest written sources for Japanese mythology. They were compiled in the 8th century AD, and they tell the stories of the creation of the world, the origins of the gods, and the imperial family.
Oh, that's right. The imperial family is supposed to be descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu.
Exactly. So these texts are not just mythology, they're also political documents. They legitimize the rule of the emperor.
It's amazing how these stories can have such a powerful impact on society.
Yeah, they shape people's understanding of the world, their beliefs, their values.
So Amaterasu, she's a key figure here. She's the sun goddess and the ancestor of the emperors.
Right. And she has two brothers, Tsukuyomi, the moon god, and Susanoo, the storm god.
And Susanoo is kind of a troublemaker, isn't he?
Yeah, he's known for causing chaos and conflict. He's the one who gets banished from heaven for misbehaving.
It's interesting how you have these different personalities, even among the gods.
Yeah, it makes them more relatable, more human in a way. And then there's Okuninushi, who's a descendant of Susanoo. He's a really important figure in the Izumo cycle, which is a collection of myths about the creation of Japan.
The Izumo cycle, huh?
Yeah, it's a fascinating set of stories. Okuninushi goes on all these adventures, he overcomes challenges, he establishes order in the world. It's kind of a classic hero's journey.
That sounds cool. And the articles also mention all these other fascinating creatures like Tengu, Oni, and Kappa.
Right, the Tengu are these part human, part bird creatures. They can be tricky and mischievous, but they can also be wise and helpful.
Kind of like fairies.
Yeah, a little bit. And then the Oni are these horned demons. They can be pretty scary. And the Kappa are these water creatures, are kind of like mischievous imps.
Wow, Japanese mythology is full of these really interesting beings.
It is. They represent the different forces of nature, the spirits that inhabit the world.
Okay, so what about the creation myth in Japanese mythology?
Well, in the Kojiki, it starts with this primordial chaos, and then heaven and earth separate out of it, and then you have these different generations of gods emerging. It's a slow process of the world coming into being.
And then there's the story of Izanagi and Izanami creating the islands of Japan by stirring the ocean with a jeweled spear.
Right. That's a really powerful image. It shows the divine origin of the land itself.
And it connects to that Shinto belief that everything has a spirit.
Exactly. And there's this famous myth about Okuninushi and the White Rabbit of Inaba. It's a story about deception and suffering, but also about the importance of compassion and kindness.
And it's one of those stories that teaches you a lesson, right?
Yeah, about how good deeds are ultimately rewarded and how arrogance and cruelty are punished.
It's like a fable. And then there's the story of Izanami's death. She dies giving birth to the fire god Kagutsuchi.
It's a tragic story, but it also shows how life and death are intertwined, how creation and destruction are part of the same cycle.
And it's interesting that the imperial family is considered to be divine. The term tennis actually means heavenly emperor.
Yeah, it's like their authority comes directly from the gods.
And of course, there are different interpretations of these myths, different versions of the stories.
Right, like the Shintoshu, which is a Buddhist text that offers a different perspective on the origins of the gods, and the Hatsumatsutai, which presents another version of the myths.
So it's not just one fixed story, it's a collection of different perspectives and interpretations.
Exactly. And one last thing about Japanese mythology, the spelling of the names can be a bit confusing.
Yeah, I noticed that. Why is that?
Well, it's partly due to changes in the Japanese language over time. And also, many of the deities have multiple names or aliases, which can make things a bit tricky.
Okay, so let's shift gears again and head back west to Greece. You sent in some articles about a chimera pendant, a series of artworks based on the Perseus myth, and a sword representing Theseus.
Ah, Greek mythology. It's always so fascinating.
I know, right? It's so influential, and it continues to inspire artists and writers even today.
For sure. Those stories are timeless. They speak to something deep within us.
Okay, so first up, the chimera. It's described as this terrifying creature, right? A mix of lion, goat, and serpent.
Yeah, it's a monstrous being representing the impossible, the chaotic.
And yet there's this beautiful 18K gold pendant depicting it. It's like taking something fearsome and turning it into art.
It's interesting, isn't it? Maybe it's a way of confronting those primal fears, of finding beauty even in the monstrous.
And then we have the myth of Perseus, the son of Zeus, who slays the Gorgon Medusa. It's such a classic hero's tale.
Yeah, full of adventure and danger. And you sent in this article about Sir Edward Coley Burne-Jones's Perseus series, which is a set of 10 cartoons he created in 1875. They depict key scenes from the myth.
Oh, that's right. I remember seeing images of those cartoons. They're really beautiful.
Yeah, they are. It's a shame he never got to finish them as oil paintings, but even in their unfinished state, they're incredibly detailed and expressive.
And it's fascinating how they're being preserved today with modern technology, like this special acrylic glazing.
Right, it's like ensuring that these works of art can be enjoyed for generations to come.
And then there's Theseus, the hero of Athens. He's known for slaying the Minotaur in the labyrinth.
Ah, Theseus, he's like the embodiment of the civic hero. He uses his strength and courage to protect his people.
And his defeat of the Minotaur is this classic symbolic victory of order over chaos.
Exactly. And it's interesting that you can even find decorative swords today that are based on the sword Theseus used to slay the Minotaur.
I know, it's like holding a piece of the myth in your hand. Okay, last but not least, we're heading to Egypt. We have this article about Isis, the goddess of magic, healing, motherhood. She's a really important figure in Egyptian mythology.
Oh yeah, Isis. She's one of the most iconic and enduring deities in ancient Egypt. Her worship spanned centuries, from the Old Kingdom all the way to the Roman period.
And she even absorbed aspects of other goddesses over time.
Right, like Hathor and Nut. She became this multifaceted figure who embodied a lot of different qualities.
And Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, she associated herself with Isis.
Yeah, she saw herself as a living embodiment of the goddess. It shows just how powerful Isis was, both religiously and politically.
And the article mentions that her temple at Philae was one of the last pagan temples to be shut down in Egypt.
Yeah, in the 6th century AD, after the rise of Christianity, it shows how long-lasting her cult was, how deeply she was revered.
But her most important roles are as wife to Osiris and mother to Horus, right?
Exactly. Those relationships are central to her mythology. They form this divine triad, this holy family.
And the article even mentions how sibling marriage among pharaohs might be connected to the myth of Osiris and Isis.
Yeah, it's a fascinating link between mythology and royal custom. It suggests how deeply these stories influence their beliefs and practices.
So the basic story is that Osiris is murdered by his brother, Seth, and then Isis uses her magic to bring him back to life just long enough to conceive Horus.
And then Osiris becomes the ruler of the underworld.
Right. And Isis has to protect Horus from Seth, who wants to usurp the throne.
Yeah, it's a really dramatic story, full of twists and turns,
Yeah.
like how Isis tricks Seth into judging against himself.
And there's that whole weird episode with the semen and Thoth.
Yeah, that one's a little strange. But it shows how resourceful and clever Isis is.
She's definitely a force to be reckoned with. And she eventually helps Horus defeat Seth and claim his rightful place as king.
It's a classic story of good versus evil, of order being restored.
And it highlights Isis's role as a protector, as a defender of justice.
Exactly. And she's often depicted with the Tiet knot, which is a symbol of protection. And she's also shown nursing the infant Horus, which might even have influenced the later Christian imagery of the Madonna and child.
Wow, that's fascinating. And it's interesting that she's sometimes confused with Hathor.
Yeah, they share some visual characteristics, so you have to pay attention to the inscriptions to tell them apart.
But beyond her roles as wife and mother, Isis was also seen as a powerful ruler in her own right.
Right. She ruled Egypt while Osiris was in the underworld.
So she was a queen, a magician, a healer, a protector. She's a really complex and fascinating figure.
She is, and she represents the strength and resilience of women in ancient Egypt.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's amazing to see how these different mythologies from all over the world share these common themes.
Yeah, like creation myths, divine families, the struggle between good and evil, the use of trickery, the cycle of death and rebirth.
It's like we're all grappling with the same fundamental questions, the same human experiences, no matter where we come from.
Exactly. And it shows how mythology can transcend cultural boundaries, how it speaks to something universal within us.
And it's clear that these ancient stories still resonate with us today, whether it's through art like Nicola Vudrug's sculptures or through popular culture or even just through the names of places.
These myths are still alive, still relevant, still inspiring.
So, for you, our listener, we want you to think about which of these mythological figures or stories spoke to you the most? Which ones resonated with you on a personal level, and why? What do your choices tell you about your own beliefs, your own hopes and fears, your own understanding of the world?
These myths are like mirrors. They reflect back to us our own humanity.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep learning, keep digging deeper. There's a whole world of wonder waiting for you in these ancient stories.
Absolutely.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.